Shalom Aleichem and welcome. Today we're going to learn a sikha in Chelek Tezayin, Parshas Bishalach Dalid, the fourth sikha. This is a sikha that gives us an overview, sai on the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin, and sai on the mitzvah of Shabbos, the importance of having a Siddur Shabbos and honoring Shabbos. All right, let's get right to it. By Erev Tavshilin is the din. Concerning the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin, there is a halacha. As bald nachdem v'me'endek zugreiten alle tzarchei Shabbos. Now, what are you doing? You are, because you made the Erev Tavshilin, you're allowed to prepare on Yontif for the following Shabbos meal. So now you have something that you set aside for the Erev Tavshilin, and you are preparing the Shabbos meal. When you're done preparing all the Shabbos meal, Megman oifes and dem Erev. You really, once you got it done, you could finish. You could eat now the Erev. The Erev is just only to give you permission to cook or prepare for the next day. But once you got everything done, you could even eat that Erev. Noch inem tag von Yontif, even though it's still Yontif, you're not leaving the Erev for the next day. Halachically, you could eat the Erev Tavshilin. That's the halacha. Steht aber in Maril. However, the Maril suggests, as hat eingeführt, that he instituted that even though the Erev Tavshilin may be eaten on Yontif still, nevertheless, la'niach kikar ha'erev Tavshilin, to leave over some bread, the bread of the Erev Tavshilin, l'lechem mishnah, that it should be used part of the lechem mishnah b'leil Shabbos, part of the lechem mishnah for Friday night, ubishachrisoi, and also used for lechem mishnah on the Shabbos day meal. And only b'suda shlishis, and only the last meal of Shabbos, the suda shlishis, hoya b'tzeya olav. He would actually cut and eat that bread that was originally for the Erev Tavshilin. It was placed by all three Shabbos meals just to be there, and then the third meal they actually ate it. When Azay bringt euch the Marshal, and this is the words that the Marshal also suggests, and since we need the Erev to last. In other words, he suggests that I don't want you to eat it yet before Shabbos. Since the Erev should last, ein roi la'ich ad leil Shabbos. You should not eat it until the night of Shabbos. Umikol makom, even though night of Shabbos, as Shabbos enters already, even according to the Marshal, Friday night you can eat it. Says the Marshal, mikol makom, nevertheless, hoyaminig maram, lahanicha hakikar tachas alecha mishnah b'leil Shabbos ulemacharasoi ubesuda gimel hoya b'tzeya olav. Only in the third meal they would eat the kikar, the bread from the Erev Tavshilin. And the reason for all this is me'achar dis abad bei mitzvah achas. Once you did already one mitzvah with this challah, the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin, roy lases all of mitzvah acheres. It's already get other mitzvahs done with it with the same challah. And that's the reason we keep on rolling it over from the lechem mishnah Friday night, Shabbos day, and into Shalosh Yudas. Euch the Alter Rebbe bringt it up at the minig in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe in Hilchos Erev Tavshilin brings it in Shulchan Aruch. These are the words of the Alter Rebbe. L'chatchila tzarich shiyu apas v'atavshil shmurim etzloi. The bread and the dish that you put away for Erev Tavshilin should be kept ad la'achar shetikin kol tzarchei Shabbos, as long until you finish preparing all the Shabbos meal. And once you prepare the Shabbos meal, l'chayir al pi din, you can eat the Erev Tavshilin. Nevertheless, mikol makom, mitzvah min hamuvchar lahamtin malecha lapash shel Erev Tavshilin. It's best to wait. It's mitzvah min hamuvchar to wait to eat the bread from the Erev Tavshilin. Ad echad migimel shudas Shabbos. Roll it into one of the three. Pay attention to these words. To leave it over to one of the three meals of Shabbos. Kedei leftzoya olav. So you should break the bread on one of the meals of Shabbos. Shekol davar shenasa by mitzvah achas. Because once anything is done to a mitzvah, any item you use for a mitzvah, roy lasis by mitzvah acheres. It's proper to. It's a special thing. You should roll it in to do other mitzvahs with it. So the first suggestion is just leave it for Shabbos and use it for one of the lechem mishnah on Shabbos or through the Shabbos. However, those that go even further, as mentioned before, that the Maril did this. Shaloi liftzaya olav atzu the gimel shel Shabbos, not to eat it until the shalosh shudas meal. Kidei lases by mitzvahs harbe. So many mitzvahs should be done over the same loaf of bread. Shamanichim za kikar lechem mishnah b'sudar rishayin. First of all, you take this the challah or the bread from the Erev Tashil and leave it as one of the two of the lechem mishnah Friday night. Ubesudar shniya shel Shabbos, and Shabbos by day again you use it as one of the breads for lechem mishnah. And only besudar shlishis baitzim olav. Only in the third meal you actually cut this bread. So this is how it is me'ikra din, and how it became the minhag to wait all the way through. Beis, the makkah from their svara, the source for this logic, as we bal meder zachas getan gevar in a mitzvah, that since one mitzvah was already accomplished with the piece of bread, and that is the Erev Tashilin, is roy to turn the mitnacha mitzvah, so you should also roll it in to do other mitzvahs with this bread, like lechem mishnah, and through the Shabbos, is in Gemara. We find this in the Gemara by Erev Chatzeres. The Gemara says that Rav Ami v'Rav Asi, ki have a misram alahu rifta de'eruva, when they had a bread of Erev, as she'aravu by etmal eruv chatzeres, any bread that they made yesterday, they used for eruv chatzeres. Mevarchan aleh hamaitzi lechem haaretz. They would bracha hamaitzi, and they would say, Amri hoyel v'isabed by mitzvah chadam nabed by mitzvah chidus. Since one mitzvah was made with it, we'll do another mitzvah with it. Unoich by eruv chatzeres, just like we find by eruv tafshilin, this thing that you should use the same object, the same food item for many mitzvahs. The same concept we find by Eruv Chatzeres, state in Maril, Belel Shabbos, B'Shachrisa, Erev Chatzeres, when you have food, to be able to use it as a joint building or a joint complex. So you join together with food. So the Maril says, Belel Shabbos, B'Shachrisa, Ani Manicha L'Lechem Mishnah. The Omar, the Gam Belel Shabbos, Yachal Ochle, really could even eat it on Friday night. But he likes to do many mitzvahs with it, and therefore besudar shlishis b'Shabbos hayibaytzei al kikar oiser she'eativ by erev v'chatzeres. He kept on using that same challah that he used for eruv v'chatzeres as lechem mishnah until besudar shlishis. So the same loaf of bread, he did one mitzvah, second mitzvah, third mitzvah, etc. And as they bring the marshal. That's the custom by when you make an Erev Chatzeres. As men estes ersht, that you only eat that Erev by the Suda Shlishis, by the third meal. Nachdem v'melektas lechem mishnah by the Tzvei ersht the Sudas. After it was used part of the lechem mishnah, the by Erev Tashilin. The same idea as we find by Erev Tashilin. You had food for one mitzvah. You keep on using it throughout Shabbos for another mitzvah. The same is by Eruv Chatzeres. Says the Rebbe, aber by dem din brengt arab der alte Rebbe nor dem sak halacha for Ramah. However, in this din, the Alter Rebbe only brings the halacha from the Ramah. The yesh liftzoya olav b'Shabbos shachris, that you should cut it, you should use it Shabbos day. The hoyo v'nasis by mitzvah achas, yesh lasis by mitzvah acheres. Now, why should you wait to eat the bread for the Erev Chatzeres till Shabbos day? Because one mitzvah was done with it. Use it also for Shabbos mitzvah, for lechem mishnah. So wait till Shabbos day. Bringt nit arab the minhag now. However, when it comes to Erev Chatzeres, he doesn't bring the third suggestion that wait till the third meal. So by says I have Erev Esh by through the Shalishis. He doesn't bring that by Erev Chatzeres you should wait to the third meal, Kidei Laharbais by mitzvah, to chaparayim another mitzvah. He says wait till Shabbos day, and that's good enough. So you have to understand, Vivalt as the Maril and the Marshal, the Mon and the Minik Sai by Erev Chatzeres, and Sai by Erev Chatzeres, since the Marshal and the Maril both mention the same minig of rolling it over throughout all three meals of Shabbos. Side by the Erev that you made for Tafshilin, and side by the Erev you made for Chatzeres. Hein Favos bring the Alter Rebbe the minig nor by Erev Tavshilin. So why does the Alter Rebbe only mention the minig of waiting till Suda Shalishis only by Erev Tavshilin? And the Rebbe says that the same question could be asked of the Magen Avram in Ha'ara 14. Ubifrat, back into the words of the Rebbe in the parentheses, especially as the Svara Hoyel Visavad Bei Mitzvah Chad and Navad Bei Mitzvah Achrita, that the logic that you gave me, that since one mitzvah was done with it, you should roll in and do a second mitzvah, Hot Ir Moker Bei Eru Bechatzeres. The source for that, as mentioned before, the source is from the Gemara in Brachos and the Gemara in Shabbos that Rav Ami, when he had bread from Eruv Chatzeres, kept it for made many brachas with it, many mitzvahs. So if that's the source for this whole conversation, why would the Alter Rebbe not say to wait till Shuda Shlishis by Eruv Chatzeres, and he only said that by Eruv Tavshilin? Let me das verstehen. Eis Gimel. So you'll understand this. Nachdem wir mit Bavarin in der Schwierigkeit in den Etzem Minig zu bezählen sein auf Erev Tavshilin by the Sudas Gimel Shel Shabbos the Hasis by Mitzvahs Harbe. Says the Rebbe, before I get to this, the division of Eruv Chatzeres and Eruv Tavshilin, let's first understand there is a basic problem leaving the challah of the Eruv Tavshilin over to Suda Shlishis. Let it go one meal, second meal, third meal. So many mitzvahs should be done with that. There's some basic question you have to understand first. In the Ershtes Zwei Sudas from Shabbos is doch da Gresher Chashivus when the Suda Shlishis. When you want to weigh the three meals of Shabbos, night meal, the day meal, and the Suda Shlishis, nobody is going to put the third meal, the Suda Shlishis, on the top. Perhaps maybe the day meal, that's the most chashuv meal. But if you're looking when to eat the challah in the most chashuv of time, Suda Shlishis, even though it's the third time you're using it, it's not the most honorable time. The Rebbe is going to prove it's not the most honorable time. Like Kamadeus, according to many opinions, darf man in Ham kein Mishnah by the Suda Shlishis. You see in Shulchan Aruch that there are many opinions that say yes, you should eat Suda Shlishis, and yes, you should wash Suda Shlishis, but you don't necessarily need a Lechem Mishnah. Nachmer, even more than that. Under the Halton, there are those that hold that you don't even have to wash by the third meal. As the Suda Shlishis, Dafim Bechal, that Haman came past. You don't even need bread by the third meal. Which is genug, is enough to eat a dish that's made from the 5 grain. Doesn't have to be bread. These are the and even more than that, there are those opinions as the student Paris. There are those that say you can fulfill the third meal just by eating fruit. So you don't even need bread the third meal. So why would you force the issue by rolling the Erev Tavshilin to the third meal where you don't need bread? It's nit galactic. It's not smooth. Why should you push off, to delay, to by from Kikar Erev, to cut, to eat the bread that you have for the Erev Tashilin, biz the Suda Shlishis, and wait to the third meal? Then the Achilas from Pastafgad is nitazay chashiv. To eat bread in that meal is not such a specialty. You could get away without eating bread. Other than ganzen rishus, it's optional. It would have been made more sense, more honorable, to take this bread and eat it in the Shabbos day meal. Was demold by eating it in the day meal, then with this loaf of bread, you would have accomplished not only we would have accomplished twice using it for Lechem Mishnah, Friday night and daytime, we know the mitzvah of a meal, primarily the Shabbos meal, is a day meal. So you could connect it that not only you used it for Lechem Mishnah, you actually fulfilled the mitzvah of Suda Shabbos with that challah if you eat it then. Asuda versus when is kula alma mechuyev to essen pas. In that meal, the meal of Shabbos day, everybody holds you have to eat bread. So why are we pushing it off to the meal that's you could get away without bread? Men kenid zogin. Don't answer as das is to live them was demo tutmen by kicker adita mitzvah. You're going to say, you know what? Yes, but by rolling it over to the third meal, you're using a mitzvah, using this bread for a third mitzvah. Which mitzvah? Birchas hamoitzi by the Suda Shlishis. If you're going to eat it, you're going to have to make a moitzi. A moitzi is a bracha. So that would be the third time you're doing a mitzvah. If that's the reason, is the birchas hamoitzi the reason you're rolling it over, then I have a problem. Ravi Baal, as by the Suda Shlishis, is the kamadeus nita the chiyuv from pas, since during the third meal, according to many opinions, there is no chiyuv of eating bread. Is in them below dar birchas hamoitzi als birchas hanenim. Then, so when you make the bracha hamoitzi while eating challah on Suda Shlishis, it's not eating it as a chiyuv of a mitzvah. You're eating it because, like any other time you eat bread, you have to birchas hanenim means every time you have pleasure from any food item, you have to make a bracha. So on Suda Shlishis, if you eat bread, it's not a mitzvah; it's a nenim. It's like eating in the middle of the week. Is doch das faran euch beim is mitzvah by the Suda Shachris. That part you even find in the morning meal. Nice of the mitzvah from Lechem Mishnah. Yet on Shabbos morning you get a double. You get that it's Lechem Mishnah and it's Birchas Hanenim, and over there you also have the fact that you could use it as part of Suda Shabbos, which is obligatory. So I don't get, says the Rebbe, why you insist to roll it over one more time to Suda Shlishis. Says the Rebbe, Ois Dalid. The beer in them, the explanation is like this. In Gemara wird gebracht zwei Timim after takana from Erev Tavshilin. Let's first understand what is the whole takana of Erev Tavshilin. Erev Tavshilin is when Friday is Yom Tif, and you're only allowed to cook on Yom Tif for Yom Tif. But because tomorrow is Shabbos, so if you make an Erev Tavshilin, there's an extension that you could cook on Yom Tif for the next day for Shabbos, right? What's the reason for that? So there's two reasons in the Gemara. Now the Rebbe in Ara 19 is Medayik. It's not the two reasons are not arguing, but they're just explaining. It's not an argument. So any time after the Takana from Erev Tashilin. Aleph, Rava Zakt, Rava says, Kidei sheyivra yafel l'Shabbos and mana yafel l'Yom Tov. So a person should have a good dish, a tasty good dish for Shabbos, and a tasty good dish for Yom Tov. What does that mean? Upirush Rashi. So Rashi says, look, mitoich shema'arev, since he's making the Erev Tavshilin, zoicher as a Shabbos. He remembers that tomorrow is a day of Shabbos that he has to take care of. Ve'ena mechala sakar Yom Tov, and he doesn't use up everything Yom Tov. He'll remember. He'll always have fresh food for Shabbos too. Vasilafizeh. So if that's the reason, is the takana from the Erev Tavshilin kidei laharbos b'kvod Shabbos. So it's so Shabbos should be honorable. So you should not remember on Yom Tov. You should remember a day earlier that not to finish everything and to create a good atmosphere for Shabbos. So Shabbos should look good. So we give you an exemption that Yom Tov you're allowed to do things that you're usually not allowed to do. Beis, the second reason is Rav Ashi Amar. Rav Ashi gives a different reason. Kidei sheyomru ein ofen miyom tov l'Shabbos. Kal v'chaymer liyom tov l'chol. The reason why we are only allowed to do this if you make an Erev Tavshilin. That means to teach a person without an Erev Tavshilin, you can't. Now I don't get it. Today is Yom Tiv, tomorrow is Shabbos. Isn't Shabbos holier than Yom Tiv? And yet, the only way I'm allowed to cook on Shabbos on Yom Tiv for Shabbos, the only way I'm allowed to cook on Yom Tiv for Shabbos is if I make an Erev Tavshilin. So a person will make this calculation, Ein oifim mi Yom Tiv l'Shabbos. I'm not allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos unless I make Erev Tavshilin. Kal v'chaymer, how much more so? I'm not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for a weekday. So according to this way, it's not to show the honor of Shabbos, it's to show the honor of Yom Tov, that to cook on Yom Tov for no reason. For a weekday, you're not allowed to. Only because of this exemption, I'm allowed to cook for Shabbos. What's the difference? From the nafkamina la'alocha tzavishim litzvei taimim. What's the difference if the first reason is the correct one, Rava's reason is the main one, or Rav Ashi's reason? Zok the Rosh gives an explanation like this. Loit and tam from Rava, according to Rava's reason. So Shabbos should be plentiful, Shabbos should be fresh. Kedei sheyir v'roimona yafel Shabbos. Muzme machen dem erev dafke erev yantiv. According to Rava, the whole thing is that Shabbos should be special. So if Shabbos should be special, you have to make the erev tavshilin on Yom Tov. You can't make it before Yom Tov. Inim tog when a great machalim covered Yom Tov, on the days where he's preparing food for Yom Tov. On the erev at the morning in Tzarchei Shabbos, because today he's preparing food for today. So he also says, hey, don't forget tomorrow's Shabbos. Because if you're going to make the erev before Yom Tov, he won't remember because he made the erev too early. Because he made the erev too early, when the time comes and Shabbos is coming, by then he forgets already. However, according to the second reason, the reason Rav Rashi gives, so a person, that the whole reason you make a erev tafshilin is so a person should know that from a Yom Tov to a weekday, you can't cook, but from a Yom Tov to a Shabbos, because of the exemption is I'm allowed to cook. Is genug blois das was the erev is kayim erev Yom Tov. It's enough only by the fact that you have an erev done. That's a good enough reminder. But making it doesn't have to be done on Erev Yom Tov. It could be done a few days before Erev Yom Tov. Again, the difference between the two opinions, does it have to be done on Erev Yom Tov, or could it be done a couple of days before Yom Tov? According to the Rava, it has to be done on Erev Yom Tov. While you're cooking for Yom Tov food, you should remember that tomorrow I could cook for Shabbos food. But if you're doing it too early, you won't remember. Whereas, according to the second reason, if it's just to teach you something, as long as it's available, it will teach me. The Alter Rebbe brings the Rabbeinu time in Shulchan Aruch, and the Alter Rebbe discusses the halach of erev tashilin. He brings both reasons, nor in a Farkerten Seder. However, he brings it in a different order than how it's brought in the Gemara. Aleph, he says, Kedei laharbes b'chvayid Yom Tov, to make Yom Tov more honorable, showing that you can't just cook for any reason. And a base, Kedei laharbes b'chvayid Shabbos. Says the Rebbe, Mitter oiben the montan of kaminat tzivishn zei la'alacha. The Alter Rebbe goes on to explain what's the difference if it's l'kvayid Shabbos or l'kvayid Yom Tov. The Alter Rebbe says like this, in fair choice, and he concludes, Le'inya Maisa. So bottom line, since I brought you both reasons, and there is a nafkamina la'alacha if I could do it earlier or not, earlier in the week, says the Alter Rebbe, the difference is Le'inya Maisa, bottom line, Ein la'ariv l'chatchila ela be'arev Yom Tov mamish. L'Yom Tov zeh b'vad. The erev tavshilin should only be made on erev Yom Tov for this Yom Tov. Commotion is bar, as is explained, lefitama beis, according to the second reason. Kedei lahar, but his second reason. Kedei lahar beis b'kvoid Shabbos. There has to be as close as possible as Shabbos, to Shabbos. Avol b'di'evet. However, b'di'evet shekvar irev Yom Rab kaidim Yom Tov. If he already made an erev tavshilin a couple of days before Yom Tov. Ube'erev Yom Tov mamish shachach, and he didn't remake another one on erev Yom Tov. V'lo irev mutar lismach alei ruvay. But the Evid, he can rely on one that he did earlier, because after all, there is an opinion that says you don't have to necessarily do it on erev Yom Tov. Thus haste. In other words, we should also be concerned about the reason of kavod Shabbos, and the kavod Shabbos means as close as possible to Shabbos to make the Erev, that you should see that Shabbos is taken care of. But b'diavad, if you at least you have an Erev done a couple of days ago, so the mindset that is there, at least the kavod yontif will be good. Hey, the chilek zwischen die zwei Timim, the difference between these two reasons, is nit nar tzid dakana tzilib yontif other tzilib Shabbos. It's not only what's the main objective here at Erev Tavshilin, to show the honor of Yom Tif or to be careful to honor Shabbos. Nar nachmer, it's really deeper. In Toichen Takana, it has to do, it's much deeper than that. The two reasons are really different in what the concept, or what are you looking to accomplish with this Erev Tavshilin. Light in time from Rav Ashi. According to the reason of Rav Ashi says, kavod yontif. People should know that yontif you're only allowed to keep doing things for yontif. The exemption is Shabbos, but anything else you're not allowed to. Yeah. Like Rav Ashi is the teichna takana shlila. The concept of this takana of making Erev Tavshilin is negative. Is negative means to make sure you don't make a mistake. When in Svei Pratim, and it's trying to avoid that you don't make two mistakes. Aleph, mistake number one is Tzubavarnin on Inyan Aser Shlili. The first thing is a person should really realize that you shouldn't make a mistake and cook on Yom Tov for a weekday. That is something that's prohibited. And because of that, Beis kommt die Takana to show sein zu Ashrin the Bishul Yontiv l'Shabbos Elim Kain Hischul Levashel Tavshel Echem Erev Yontiv. And because of that, I'm not allowed to cook on a Yontiv for a weekday, I'm even not allowed to cook on a Yontiv for Shabbos unless you began cooking on Yontiv, which is what the Erev Tavshilin is. I made something now that I'm dedicating for the Shabbos, then the food for Shabbos becomes permitted. But without that, even that's usher. Without that, even for Shabbos, if you cook, it's usher. Mashen can lighten time for Rava. However, according to Rava's reason, that it's all to make sure that Shabbos is honorable, is Toichanat Takana, the real understanding, the real logic of why they established making an Erev Tavshilin, it's chiyuv. It's all about positive. Exactly about the two previous issues, in both we're looking at it in a positive angle. Aleph. First of all, durch the Takana vet Marvarin, once they established the Takana of Erev Tavshilin, what was warned, what was taken care of, as the Achana to Shabbos Ozayin Kedebai, that you're going to take care of Shabbos properly. That you'll make sure there's a good meal prepared for Shabbos. And once you're sure that once you're preparing a good meal for Shabbos, Beis, as the Ikar Takana is the Savekling them Eruv. The main thing of the Takana is put aside this Eruv, which reminds us the obligation that one has to prepare for Shabbos. And contrary, there is from Bishul B'Shabbos Shabbos and this prohibition not allowing to cook from Yontif for a Shtei V'Shabbos, unless you make a Erev, only then you're exempt, is nar to far stark in the Takana for the Shabbos. That's not to warn you that you're not going to be able to eat the food without it. It's adrab. On the contrary, it's showing you how important Shabbos is, that everything has to be made now and fresh, and you have to be ready for Shabbos. Kidaboy, it has to be done properly. Based on this, you can understand another point. The Gemara brings Svea Smachtis. The Gemara brings two proofs, two rayas from Pasuk from Din from the Erev Tavshilin. Even though Erev Tavshilin is obviously not a Din Dairaisa, But the Gemara brings proofs from Psukim for this din. Aleph, Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, the Amar Kra, Zocher Yom HaShabbos Lekacha. You have to remember the day of Shabbos to sanctify it. Zochreyu me'acha shabo la'ashkichai. Once a person chas v'sholom might forget it, so we're telling you, remember it. Beis, the Tana Maisa. So in other words, when you're getting in the huplap of Yom Tiv, and Shabbos is after Yom Tiv, you might forget it. So you have to do something to remember it, and that is why you make an Erev Tashilin. Beis, the Tana Maisela Mehacha. The Tana Shmuel brought the raya from Zochreyu. The Tana brings another raya. Eis Asher Toifu Afu, the Eis Asher Tavashelu Bashelu, Tavashelu Bashelu. Vashteit beParsha Sena, which is mentioned in Parshas Beshalach. Mikan Amar Rabbi Lezer Ein Oifen Ela Ala Afui. Mikan Samcha Chachamim LeEruve Tavshilim Min Torah. From this pasuk is another raya. Only if something was already baked, then you could continue baking for Shabbos. And he's going to explain in a second. And the first reason the Torah says remember Shabbos because you might forget it is Rashi Mefarish. Rashi explains Kishabo Yom Tov Shabbos. If Friday is a Yom Tov, Korev Shabbos Shtakeach. It's very possible that you're going to forget between the whole huplap of having a wonderful day of Yom Tiv, you're going to forget that tomorrow's Shabbos. Machmas Yom Tiv. And not only you're going to forget, you're going to be full and you're going to have Shamar Bebesudav Sayyim. And during Yom Tiv, you're having a lot of festive meals. And you're not remembering to leave over meals enough for Shabbos the way Shabbos deserves. So the Torah reminds you to remember, and so when you do the act of Erev Tavshilim, you are remembering Shabbos. What's from Pirush Rashi is move on. The way Rashi understands this is understood. The way Rashi explains it, it's self-understood as the asmachta from pasuk Zocher Shem Shabbos Lekachay. That what we learn out from this pasuk, Zochreyu me'acha shabal ashkichai, is not like in time from Rava. That's almost pretty similar to what Rava says. That I want to make sure that Shabbos is beautiful, and Shabbos you have everything you need, so you might forget it. So that's the reason you do Erev Tashilin. So where is the asmachta? If Rava's reason is not the right reason, if Rav Ashi's reason is the right reason, where is the asmachta in Zocher Shem Shabbos Lekache? Well, l'chayr is nit moving, says the Rebbe. L'chayr, I don't understand. The Gemara brings Beta Tamim. The Gemara brings both reasons. The reason from Rava that Shabbos is the main thing, and the reason for Rav Ashi that Yom Tov is the main reason. And the Gemara brings a behet of asmachta from pasuk Zocher Shem Shabbos Lekache. Right after this, that the reason that the pasuk Zocher Shem Shabbos Lekache, seemingly that would be a pasuk that would fit according to both, according to Rava and according to Rav Ashi. The zweite asmachta, only the second asmachta from the pasuk as Eisha Shetoifu, only that bring the Gemara Esh Noch and Abra bring Beta Tamim from Rava and Rav Ashi. That's brought after the two reasons. So once the Gemara brings this before the two reasons, Haifavos nemt on Rashi as the asmachta from pasuk Zocher Shem Shabbos Lekachay is like in time from Rava. The way Rashi explains it, it's pretty clear that Zocher Shem Shabbos Lekachay is only a proof that Rava is correct, that it's all to remember Shabbos, the way Rashi explains it. Pia now is moving. However, based on what I said before, says the Rebbe, everything is understood. The limud from the Tzveita Asmachta, the lesson that you learn from the second pasuk, direkt ois ditakonen and oifen shlilui, as the Gemara itself says, from that pasuk you learn what not to do. Ein oifen ela afui, that you're not allowed to bake unless it's afui. Men hat geaser the bishul yontiv, you did not allow to cook on yontiv. Seiden es is da ha'afui, unless on yontiv to cook for Shabbos, you're only allowed to do if you already cooked b'chamishi b'Shabbos. You already cooked something earlier. However, how we learn the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin from Zachar Yom Shabbos Lekachay is more a positive reaction. Director es ois in a ofen chayuvi es muzayin der Zachreu. You have to remember Shabbos. When the Rebbe named on Rashi, therefore Rashi accepts as the asmachta from Zachar Yom Shabbos Lekachay is like in time from Rava. It fits much better according to Rava as the takana from Erev Tavshilin is ha'inyan chayuvi. Rava's understanding of Erev Tavshilin is a positive thing to increase awareness of Shabbos. So therefore, because the pasuk of Zachar Shemel Shabbos Lekachay is teaching us a positive thing, it fits better with Rava's view. The second pasuk will fit better with Rav Ashi's view, because over there it's telling you what you're not allowed to do if you don't have an Erev Tavshilin. Zayin. Appear now, based on this, as late Rava is the takana for Erev Tavshilin and Inyan Chiyuvi, based on what I just said, that according to Rava, Erev Tavshilin is a positive thing. From Zachreu, that you should remember Shabbos, because it's going to be a situation where you might forget Shabbos because it's a whole day of Yontif before it. Kemen Zogen, based on that, you could say, as hatan art, late and tam, so halten dem ganzen Erev Tavshilin euch im Tag von Shabbos Gufa. Based on this, remember, Rava's vision is that Erev Tavshilin is to show how great Shabbos is, how good Shabbos is. Oh, if that's Rava's vision, then it makes sense that according to Rava, you should hold the Erev Tavshilin through Shabbos. Remember, we're going back to the original question, the original halacha. Could you eat Erev Tavshilin right away once you finish preparing for Shabbos, or do you wait till Shabbos night or Shabbos day, or Shalosh Shudas? So now the Rebbe says, since Rava is telling you that it's all about how great Shabbos is, I understand why you have to wait till Shabbos to eat it. But Amagam, as when man endigt zu great knowledge, Shabbos is Meshem Bavorn. From Chash and Kara Shabbos is Takeach, even though once you prepare all the meal before Shabbos, you're done. You don't have any more the concern that you might forget Shabbos, because you obviously didn't forget. You prepared Shabbos. And we don't have the concern that you don't have enough food for Shabbos. And you're not using everything up for Yontif. You're cooking now for Shabbos. And once you already cooked for the Shabbos meal, for that reason, everybody agrees you're allowed to eat the Erev. From that again, even though you're allowed to, nevertheless, since, as Rava points out, the point of the Erev is to Zachreu, to continue, remember Shabbos, show how Shabbos is great, is mistaber, it makes sense, as the Zichrim mitzad Erev zoldarin oiche Shabbos gufa, that whatever the Erev is supposed to remind you should last through Shabbos. Just like the simple translation of the words, remember to sanctify the day of Shabbos, as medarf gedenk in Shabbos in a tag Shabbos for Shabbos gufa, that on Shabbos you should remember Shabbos, not necessarily before Shabbos. So even though you finish the meal and you have everything, you finish preparing the meal, and you have everything done for Shabbos, and you didn't forget it, but still we want you to remember on Shabbos something due to the Erev. And another way how to put it, since this could have been a Shabbos that you might have forgotten, is there Zocher Shema Shabbos Lekachay from them Shabbos Minatoisvas Adgosha? Since this is not a regular Shabbos, this is a Shabbos that could have been overlooked because the day before it is Yom Tif, so you might have lost the beauty of the day of afterwards of Shabbos. So you have to make a special effort that being that it's a day after Yom Tif, you should make that Shabbos special. So the Erev should be rolled in, I understand, to Shabbos, to make the Shabbos special. As das soll euch sein durch ein Erev Tavshilin b'Shabbos, that the Erev Tashilin on Shabbos should show that it's special. V'yesh Leimar, and you could say, as thus is the time v'shteit the Maril, this is the reason what the Maril says by Erev Tashilin, v'toiv v'loheiser miyantiv l'Shabbos. It's best to leave over the Erev Tashilin from Yontiv, not to eat it on Yontiv. Eat it on Shabbos. From Stimas L'Shoine is mashma, from the way he just says this halacha is understood, as is nitnar mitzadim tam from hoyel v'savad by mitzvah chada. The Maril does not say, okay, since you already did a mitzvah with it, do another. He doesn't mention that. He says it's a good thing to keep it for Shabbos. Unachmer, as is moving mikolshkin, mimashakasim. Sorry, as is moving mimashakasim b'minhagim from marat hirna. It's understood from what's brought from other sefer minhagim. The yishmar erev achi kanes haShabbos. You should keep the erev until Shabbos comes in. Va'aloi time shorava, because it's nothing to do that once a mitzvah was done with it, do another mitzvah. There's a different reason. According to Rava, the way Rava understands what an Erev Tavshilin is just halten the Erev of Shabbos I soften the Zachreya from Erev Tavshilin. That emphasizes what the Erev Tavshilin is all about. Remembering Shabbos. Because it's all about remembering Shabbos, where is it better to remember Shabbos than on Shabbos itself? So leave the Erev Tavshilin for Shabbos. The mid is oich verstandig the diak haloshin from Alter Rebbe and Shulchan Aruch. With this, you could also understand the way the Alter Rebbe paskin, the wording the Alter Rebbe uses in the Shulchan Aruch. By Erev Chatzeres Shreibter, when it comes to Erev Chatzeres, the Alter Rebbe says, Erev ain't tzarich liyas kayin ela bein hashmashos. Really, the Erev should only last once you made the Erev, once you joined together all the families. You don't need to keep it the Erev too long. But v'yesh liftzaya olav b'Shabbos shachris, those that keep it till Shabbos morning, the hoyel v'nasis by mitzvah achas, because once you did already one mitzvah with it, yesh lasis by gamka mitzvah acheres. You should also do another mitzvah. But when them hemshech haloshin is moving, the way the Alter Rebbe puts it's understood as the hider from liftzaya olav b'Shabbos shachris, the hider that you're gonna eat the challah tomorrow day by Shabbos. That has nothing to do with the fact that you made an Erev Chatzeres with this. It has to do that any mitzvah could have done the same thing. It has nothing particular with the fact, with the insight of what Erev Chatzeres is. Now, so as I take it, it's a separate issue in the Zach. The mitkatana mitzvah, once you do one mitzvah, do a second mitzvah. They don't connect. However, by Erev Tashilin, the Alter Rebbe adds one more point. Is a medayik. Not only do one mitzvah, do another mitzvah. The Alter Rebbe says the bread has to last until you finish cooking the Shabbos meal. From the dry letter of the law, you're allowed to eat once you finish preparing Shabbos meal on Yontiv. Nevertheless, mitzvah and a mufchas. See the difference? By Erev Chatzeres, yesh. There are those. He doesn't say mitzvah and a mufchas. And by Erev Chatzeres, he says that the reason to wait for Shabbos because you did one, do a next. Over here he says me'ikar adin, you fulfilled the zachreyu just by preparing all the food before Shabbos on Yom Tov. But it's a mitzvah and a mufchah. That same mitzvah of honoring Shabbos could be done better. How? To wait not to eat this bread until you finish off one of the meals of Shabbos. Yes, he also says the point. So once you did one mitzvah with it, you do a second mitzvah. But from them, is moving from the way he connects the flow for the reason to keep the Erev Tavshilin for Shabbos. It's understood as the anhoga from Mahamtim Alecha Apashat Echad Begimos to the Shabbos, that the reason why you should wait and not eat the bread before Shabbos, rather to eat in one of the meals on Shabbos, is nitnor azayta kinyan. It's not because of a separate reason. Now, in the mitzvah in the Indian for Erev Tavshilin, it makes the mitzvah Erev Tavshilin a better mitzvah. Now is a smooth one. Based on what I said, it's understood why Erev Tavshilin is better now. Why? Because once you're using this same Erev for Shabbos food, is Mimekayim Dazachreyu. In this bread, you'll fulfill remembering Shabbos. In an oifen for mitzvah mufcha, because now you're doing it much better. When the far zok the Alter Rebbe, and therefore the Alter Rebbe uses a different expression, and he says, and we call makim nevertheless, mitzvah min mufcher, the mitzvah will be fulfilled better. Vala paskin doch, because he paskins that l'chatchila daf mezich noyeg zayin oich v'litzveit tatam laharbis kayit Shabbos. Because the Alter Rebbe said l'chatchila it's better to be marbe kayit Shabbos, which means that. Which means you shouldn't do it the Erev Tavshilin too early, and also cover Shabbos. This is better when you eat this challah on Shabbos. That's how you do Zochreyu. Test. The Fibir are now based on this from standing for Vost Alter Rebbe bring down Haga from Beitzayis and from Erev by the Siddur Shlishis nor by Erev Tavshilin. Now you can understand that one of the original questions we asked: why does the Alter Rebbe say that the Erev Tavshilin you shouldn't only wait to Shabbos, the first or second meal, you should wait to the third meal. Not by Erev Chatzeres. Now, the Rebbe asked earlier, by Erev Chatzeres, he doesn't say wait to the third meal. Why? And a chayra waiting to the third meal is not so good. You should anyways, the second meal, the morning meal is a greater. This Musbar Leil, says the Rebbe, based on what I explained earlier, as like the time as Erev Tavshilin Shabbos, that by Erev Tavshilin, it's all about making Shabbos more honorable. Is euch das nutzen dem Erev l'tzorich Shabbos and inyan from Zochreyu, and using the challah for Shabbos is another point, another way how in this challah I'm sanctifying, I'm remembering Shabbos. Kumtois, if by using the challah every time I use the challah I remember Shabbos. As vos mer and lengem and nutzen dem Erev by the Suda Shabbos, the longer you use, the more times you use it, the Erev, the Zochreyu becomes greater. By the erste zwei lecha mishnah, by the first two meals you're going to use it a lecha mishnah. And by the dritte leftzayalav, and actually by the third one is the only going to be the time when is alts mer hagosha v'yisrim in the Zochreyu that makes the remembering Shabbos greater. Jeder mol was man esti macholi Shabbos, was man hat zugedreht yontev durch an Erev. Every time you eat Shabbos meal on Shabbos, and all of that is based on that yontev you prepared for it. And that's all because of the Erev is Memoisif and the Zochreyu. That strengthens the remembering of the Shabbos. Durch Mishatev Zayin to the Suda the Erev Tavshilin. And how do you do that? Here is the Erev that I actually allowed myself to remember Shabbos. In Ander Verta, in other words, says the Rebbe, when you hold the Erev in every meal, oich by the letzte Suda, even by the last meal, the Suda Shalishis, farbint men dem Zochreyu from the Erev Tavshilin mikol tzorchei Shabbos. You know what you're showing? That this Erev Tavshilin is, I remembered Shabbos, every part of Shabbos, from beginning until the end. And everything in Shabbos, I have to prepare and remember before. Biz the samel lets the trachim until the last needs. Oich mit the lets the suda all the way to the last meal. I prepare before Shabbos. I have to have a mindset for this. By Erev Tavshilin, that only makes sense by Erev Tavshilin. Was mitzadim etzem gather from Zochreyu by Erev Tavshilin. By Erev Tavshilin, there's a concept of remembering Shabbos. It does svaret to halten them Erev by the business suda shlishis. Over there, it makes sense. Okay, hold it as long as possible to show that every need, every detail of Shabbos has to be remembered, has to be taken care of. The Rebbe writes in Hara 39, however, since this svara is not mentioned clearly in Gemara Rishonim, so therefore the Alter Rebbe doesn't say this as blunt as the Rebbe says it. The Alter Rebbe says the other svara, lases boy mitzvahs harbe. Masha'en came, however, back in the Pnim. Masha'en by the Erev Chatzeres. However, when you make food, you join food together to make a Erev Chatzeres. There is no Zachreu in the Erev Chatzeres. Is das Admar Zaken, at least according to the Alter Rebbe, and they're talking Svaretz wasn't the made of the Shlishis. The Alter Rebbe doesn't say to leave it for the third meal, even though the others, as mentioned earlier, others say yes, possibly just by Erev Chatzeres you do. On the contrary, it will be better to use the bread for the Erev Chatzeres, the Shabbos meal, morning meal, than buy them kiyum mitzvahs achilas to the Shabbos. At least then there's a mitzvah that you have to fulfill to the Shabbos. It's a meal that you must have bread. So by Erev Chatzeres, it's better to have it in the day meal. By Erev Tavshilin, it's better to have it the last meal. The Rebbe in Ara 40 explains why, however, obviously this is only according to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe doesn't say that a Eruv Chatzeres is needed for the third, left for the third one. However, according to the Maril, he says even by Eruv Chatzeres, it's for the third meal. And why? What would be his benefit by keeping a Eruv Chatzeres for the third meal? Yud. The Hayra from them, Inyan Anal and Avodas Hashem. Now that we know all this, very nice. It answered all our questions in halacha. What is the Hayra in Avodas Hashem from this whole conversation of being a mindset proper for Shabbos? The chiluk between Shabbos and Yontif, the difference between Shabbos and Yontif is Mavur and Zoyar, is explained in Zoyar. A Shabbos with Angeruf Kodesh. Shabbos is referred to Kodesh, holy. When Yom Tov is Mikroi Kodesh, we call holy. What's the difference? Well, Yom Tov is Memblois Koide. You call Mazmin, you prepare the Bechina from Kodesh. Das heißt, when it's Mazmin, then Kodesh, in an art from Zman from Chol. There is a weekday, and we turn that weekday into holiness. And Shabbos is the Bechina from Kodesh Alain. Shabbos is not a weekday that became holy. Shabbos is holy. Das heißt, Zman Yontif Mitzad Atzmai is Shaykh and Yonei Achel. Yontif days are connected to weekdays. The Avodah from Moed Hashem Asher Tikru Oisem. These are holidays that we have to call Atem Eden Dafka. Jews turn a weekday into a holiday. Bashteit in Mazman Zain. In them, the Bechina from Kodesh, we have to prepare. We have to change that day into a holy day as the Achila. So when we eat on Yom Tiv, so Zayin and Arifim from Kodesh. It's not a regular Monday, it's not a regular Tuesday, it's a holiday. We make everything we do on that day holy. Sadik oichel v'soiva nafshay. V'lachein, Shabbos versus Mekache v'kaima. Shabbos, however, which is in essence is holy. Mitzad Asmoi is Kulei Kodesh. It itself is holy. Ein by psoilis klau. Has no negativity in Shabbos. Masha'enk in Yom Tiv is oibes felt by B'dasi from the Eden. If a Yid doesn't prepare himself, if a Yid doesn't behave properly, I feel by Yochid, even if it's an individual, Afal Pi was the Tikru Eisem from Bezdin's given b'shleimus. Even if the community of Bezdin did everything correct, but if you yourself didn't do the right thing, is the Parash Chagechem. Parash Chagechem Kamar, V'loi Parash Shabbatchem. The Navi was telling us that we misbehaved in Yontif. We didn't do our Chagechem, our holiday, we separated. How could it be how could a Yid separate from a holiday, for a Yontif? The Avodah is in a tug. Was mitzad atzma is nitak and paris. V'meila nar tzadik oichel neifen oichel l'seva nafshe. And a guy who does the right thing, a person who is mazmin and prepares the day of Yom Tov, can make a weekday into a holiday, into a Yom Tov. But a person who doesn't have that achana, doesn't have that azmana, or doesn't have his right mindset, then it's not a holiday for him. There are different ways how a person can correct the evil, the bad. Like sweets. sharp and sour food. So if a person is eating them, but he's spicing it, he made it in a way that it's edible. Und der Eufen, as is Ibrahim talking al der Chadanim macholam arevim mesukim. There are sweet, there are food that naturally are sweet. You don't have to prepare them. This is good tasting food. And then there are foods that they're naturally bad, bitter and sour. But the way you package it up and what you put it in, it's edible. So he's going to say that's the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov. Shabbos is a sweet food, no problem. Yom Tov is how you package it. It has to be developed. Thus, the chiluk b'pinim tzvishn tzvei time of erev tavshilin. This is really the difference between the two reasons why we make an erev tavshilin. Late in time, as is kedei laharbis b'kvei Yom Tov, according to the reason that it's to be careful and show that Yom Tov is not cheap and you can't just cook for anything, is teichen takana shlila. As mentioned before, it's all about not making a mistake. When late in time laharbis b'kvei Shabbos, it's all chiyuv. It's all positive. How great Shabbos is. Since Yom Tov, the point of Yom Tov is to be mevarer, to purify, to elevate weekday and make it holy, is oich the takana laharbis b'chvei Yom Tov b'dugma laza. So if the takana of Erev Tavshilin is to increase Yom Tov, it's all about the same idea. To barvarin and inyan v'chol. To make sure, don't let the weekday overpower shlila. It's all about pushing away the bad. However, if you're dealing with the reason of increasing Shabbos, there is no bad. But Shabbos mitzad atzma mekacha v'kayim. Shabbos in itself is sweet. Hecher from the yonichel. Mitzad atzma is nitovas to shows, and there's nothing to push away. Seiden that bringt es herein, unless you brought in something negative. And the chilul Shabbos, chas v'sholom, somebody desecrate Shabbos, you took something sweet and made it sour, but it's naturally good, it's naturally holy. There's the zach from the takana, so everything about the takana of Erev Tavshilin is lahoisif or, is to increase light, to accomplish something positive. Based on this, you could explain how people at least according to the Chassidus, remember, we mentioned before that the Alter Rebbe brings Rava's reason and Ravashi reason, but the Alter Rebbe brings the in the opposite order. If a curtain say the Gemara, the different than the Gemara brings. Free of them time the harvest b'kvay Yontif. First, he brings the reason of increasing, making sure that Yontif is careful, honored. On the Nach laharvest b'kvay Shabbos, and then he brings the reason of Shabbos. In the Gemara, it's the other way around. Says the Rebbe, because in Avodas Hashem, you don't become a tzaddik overnight. Because Ascholas Avodah, the first, when a person Avodas Hashem tries to come closer, Tama Aleph, which is the first reason, step one is the Avodah from Sumeira, is keeping away from bad. Laharbis b'chvay Yontif. How do you do that? Make more things holy. When Eresh Danach came at two comments in the Hekanai Avodah, Laharbis b'chvay Shabbos. Only then you could, once you're holy, you can make it more holy. I say to you. Therefore, Al Pi Halacha, why is it that lechatchila you try to do the higher level, cover Shabbos, and that's why you can't make the Erev Tavshilim early, and that's why you keep the Erev Tavshilim until Shalosh do this. It says nitli kuva. Not everybody's expected to do that. That's best, but you can't. You didn't not keep the mitzvah if you didn't do it that way. Vida says v'vitama aleph. Tosva says mantzich when yedin and likuva b'chol makim b'chol zman b'chol inyan. What's demanded from every single person is sur meira, is keep bad out. That we could expect and demand from everybody. The avoid the muzay by every person must do that, whoever and whenever. However, the avoid of not having the existence of bad, and not even a machshava dibur ma'isa, is nit yadar kanisva. Not everybody can accomplish that. When the dibur is an ear near taught an inyan fili kuva, that's not a must for everybody. While derech achilik bein tzadik ubeinini, as we know the difference between a tzadik and beinini, shekol adam yachal liyas beinini. A beinini whose job is to push away negativity. Everybody has that. Everybody's able to do that. But at tzaddik, not everybody is able to do that. The skafia and the sapcha is the same thing. The difference between the skafia and the sapcha is skafia, everybody's able to do. It's sapcha, not everybody's able to do. Von deswegen darf man you should try the high road. As it's explained in many places, as today the avoid from the skafia so sein could the boy vamitis. Today you should be able to do the lower level of iskafia, of pushing away the bad. So sometimes you got to reach, you get the power to do iskafia by sometimes reaching high and doing iskafia. As it's explained in Eitz HaChaim, but the avodah shemitzad yichud Allah is iskafia, which is not shaykh to everybody. Or the mitzad yichudat Torah is iskafia, as kidei da avodah from yichudat Torah so zayin kedeboy v'amitis. So we should be able to do our avodah, which we are able to do properly. Muzman haben the two the avodah from yichudat Allah. Afilu di by velcha the avodah from yichudat Allah kenet time b'mitis and life from tamidi. Even for those who it doesn't happen always, we can't always be good, but sometimes you got to be great, and that gives you the highest to overpower and do your job regularly. Here's another point. Not only you have to try to do the high road lechatchila, but we also have to try to leave this kedusha, leave this thing all the way to the end. And there's two extremes. The Erev great men to Erev Yontif. Really, this Erev Tashil is not even done on Yontif. It's done Erev Yontif. Gorin, what does Erev Yontif mean? Gorin Tchilas Avoida. When you're beginning, didn't start, Shabbos didn't start. When you're just starting, even when you started the Avoida of Yontif, over there you already are making it Erev. The other extreme, zu greaten sich nicht nur zu der Darga Shabbos Bechlau, nor filu to the Suda Shlishis versus Gedua, the Garga Achiel Yoinen Shabbos. You hear what the Rebbe is saying? Even though you're making the Erev Tashil, Erev Yomtiv means in the first step of Avodas Hashem, before you reach Yomtiv, way before you reach Shabbos, but you're already given the powers then to make the Erev Tashilin that it shall last all the way through until the end of Shabbos, which is the highest part of Shabbos. Even though he's at that point, he's definitely in Tchilas Avodah, is aber durch dem, was tracht und tut am meiste, was ist verbunden mit Shabbos, just by the very fact that in Friday afternoon, Erev Yontif, you're thinking about a Shabbos, biz der Suda Shlishis, you're thinking about how this is going to last all the way then, vetas by impoiling, that will have an effect on him. As the Avodah, that what you're looking to accomplish, it will be so good, so proper, and the noch bring it to a noch avodah will lead to a much greater avodah, and it's an avodah that will be able to last all the way through till the level of Suda Shlishis.